Dear students, welcome to this part. We are going to talk about tools and methods for eco-design. So the idea is like there are many tools and methods for the assessment of product development. We are going to talk about some of them. One of them is life cycle assessment or known as LCA. The idea of this tool is like they do an assessment of all the stages of the product development from extraction to waste. So the idea is to identify all the impacts in all the stages of the process. So you will see that maybe some stages have more impacts than others. Um, so the idea of this tool is like you have to define a goal, like why you want to do a life cycle assessment, and to do define a scope, like you have to create some boundaries. After that, you will do a life cycle inventory, so you will define what are the inputs and outputs of the process, and after that, you will do an impact assessment. So the idea is like here you will define like what are the impacts of all the process and all the stages of the product development. All the time you are doing an interpretation of results. So it is very important to define why you want to do a life cycle assessment. Do you want to compare a product? Do you want to see what stage has more impact or what elements should be changed? Like sometimes some companies use this data in order to improve the products or the product development. So in that case, if it is necessary to do a scope to limit your study, you need to create some limitation of the data that you will receive because a product can have like many elements or the geographic boundaries are important as well. Like for example, if you take a specific culture or country will be different in terms of production, material, resources, extraction. So you need to do a scope of those elements. And as well, when you are doing the inventory, you need to do a scope of what are the elements that will be part of the assessment. Because when you are doing the inventory, you need to see what are all the materials, the parts, and it takes well a lot of information and data that needs to be used. So what you will determine what are the inputs, like what kind of material, energy, water, and other resources do you need for each of the product stages, product life cycle stages, and you will determine what are the outputs, like what are the emissions, the impacts that you are doing. So with this tool, you can determine a lot of impacts related to human health, greenhouse emissions, and deforestation, biodiversity loss. So you can have like different softwares where you can do an assessment of different impacts with different categories. So you can see different categories, like for example, climate change, ozone layer depletion, and many other assessments. This data will be very useful for product development in order to improve the products. As well, there are some legislation, product legislation that are very important to use because in some companies it is important to have this in order to comply with the market requirements and the legislation requirements. For example, we have the REACH, we have the Great and Blacklist, and many others. So you have determined what materials you cannot use, and some companies and some markets are very restrictive with those elements as well. Um, there are other method that is called Make Eco Indicator 99, where you can see as well the complete system. You do an assessment of each of the stages of the product development, and you see the assessment is made in three different environmental damage. We focus on human health, ecosystem quality, and resources. As well, we have the MET matrix, which is doing an assessment of the materials, the energy, and the toxic emissions of each stage of the product development process. Similar to this is the MECO matrix, which is looking as well in all the stages of the product development, but is looking at the materials, energy, chemicals, and other elements that needs to be in the assessment. There is another interesting and very useful tool. It's called Life Cycle Design Strategies Wheel, where it's possible to do a score, a ranking of different variables. Um, and the ranking goes from 0 to 6, where 0 is very bad and 6 is very good. So you can do an assessment of different variables. For example, new concept development, selection of low impact materials, reduction of material use, optimization of production techniques, optimization of distribution system, reduction of impact during use, optimization of initial lifetime, or optimization of end of life system. So this is a very useful tool where you can do an assessment of the alternative of the product that you have. Some companies have created their own assessment. For example, the company called Chinarps, they produce office equipment like furniture. So the idea is like they do an assessment of all, most of the products that they have. So they have some sustainability variables that they consider and they evaluate the products. So the idea with this is to offer to the consumer an information about the assessment and the sustainability information of each of the products so they can compare which can have the best performance into sustainability perspective. So, well, so this is the content of this module. So I hope that you enjoy and thank you for paying attention.